webinar, we hope to give you additional information on the Child Care for Working Families Act, a fantastic bill and a vision for the child care system here in our country. We're also going to be giving you the opportunity to ask questions, of course. So as you will see when you logged into GoToMeeting, you should be able to see a chat box. Please feel free to type a question to me. Again, my name is Vanessa Gonzalez. And then once we get to the question and answer portion, which is towards the end of our session, we'll be sure to get your question answered. So right now, make sure that this is working correctly. Okay, again, please remember to mute your line if you're not presenting. And although we're sure you all have beautiful hold music, please hang up and dial back to your community. Please do not put us on hold. The goals for today are a few different ones. What we want to make sure to do is to, again, provide an overview of the Child Care for Working Families Act and what it means for children, families, and teachers. Provide you with some ideas on how to get involved in all levels of government and advocate for safe, quality, and affordable child care for all children. And of course, answer any questions and ideally make some connections amongst yourself as well as with folks who dedicate their daily life working on this important issue. We are honored today to have some really special folks on this webinar with us. I already introduced myself. We're also going to have Ingrid, who is a child care teacher from Connecticut, who's going to tell us what it's really like in the classroom. Next, we're going to have Katie Ham, who is the Vice President of Early Childhood Policy here at the Center for American Progress, and Rosa Cardenas, who is a parent leader in Partnership for Community Action and UPLAN Action Network out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So again, a very special thank you to everyone for joining us, and especially to the presenters who are going to be providing their personal point of view. Before we get started, I also want to say thank you to Erin from UPLAN, Julie Cashin, a member of the Early Ed community, and Brendan Gaffney from SEIU, who also helped bring this webinar to life. So first person I'm going to turn it over to is Ingrid. Ingrid, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead and tell us what it's like, Ingrid.
Hi, my name is Ingrid Henlin. I've been a teacher in the child care program for the past 27 years at Mount Olive Child Development in Hartford, Connecticut. With a job that is so rewarding emotionally and just physically in itself, is still not rewarding when it comes to the pay of it. As a child care worker, we find out that we have teachers that are passionate about their jobs, but at the end of the passion, there's no pay behind it. Doing this and seeing children grow and develop and understanding the value of what child care provides for parents and even the elementary school, is saddening that teachers are not getting paid or recognized enough for what they do. As child care workers, we are the second teachers in a child's life after the parents, and we help them develop skills and things that they need for the elementary or public school. But yet still we're being underpaid. For the past couple of years, I look at myself, have a bachelor's degree, and yet still unable to pay for myself as a single person. Paying for your medical is expensive, paying for rent is expensive, everything is going up except for our paychecks. At our site, we have over 285 kids in our program, but within the past 10 years, due to state funding and the cuts that have been happening, we haven't had a raise in over 10 going on 11 years. It's having an impact on child care workers and teachers in the program where they have to make that decision. Do they follow their passion, or do they change their field and do something else? And a lot of teachers have strayed away from being child care workers and moved on to other fields, which is sad. We need to be recognized. We need to be paid for what we do. We look at the children as they grow and develop, and we see the true value of what we do on a daily basis. But then we look at our paychecks and look at our families and say, okay, I can't do this because I can't pay for this, or I can't go here because, you know, you can't afford it. We need to be paid for what we do, and I truly stand by that. Talking to a teacher today about, you know, the session that we're going to do, I said to her, I said, you know, what do you think about childcare? She said, you know, as a teacher in the classroom, you have your finances, and when you come to work, you got to put aside that, okay, I might go home and there's no light on in the house, or, you know, there's a notice on my door saying that eviction notice, because your paychecks are not matching up enough to pay for those bills. And, you know, just to come in and then giving you 100% and still having to walk back out to, you know, to face your challenges when you get home is quite discouraging. The past couple of years, just the fight for 15 and just talking about the pay scale of child care workers, it's really put a real dampener on what, you know, am I really doing what is going to help me provide for my family? And to be honest, it's not. You know, after 27 years, right now I'm thinking, okay, Ingrid, you got to find something else to pay your bills. I work 2 jobs right now. I do the child care time during the week, and then on the weekend, I'm a home care provider, taking care of a gentleman at home. And it takes a toll on you. You miss out on family time. You miss out on your personal time. And at the end of the day, you're just burnt out, tired, till sometimes you can't even function. It's just sad. You know, a couple years ago when I was going into childcare, I didn't think that I would come to this point, that after 27 years, I'd be like, okay, I really love what I do, but I really need to pay my bills, and trying to think about what else can I do to make ends meet. I also look at the families that we service. We have low-income families here, and listening to some of their struggles. They got to pay for childcare. They got to pay for rent. They got to pay for medical. They got to pay for everything. Some of them are working 2 jobs. Some of them pick up their kids and then drop them off at a babysitter to go to their second job. It's just sad that our government is not able to provide for everyone, child care workers, families, everyone, and money's just going to waste. One of the reasons I got involved in the fight for 15, or just working as an advocate, is that our voices need to be heard. Sometimes we sit too quiet, and we need to be able to speak up and share our stories so other people know that, you know, we're suffering. You know, when you're quiet, people don't know what you're going through, but when you start to talk and share your stories, then people can really connect and understand that, we're doing it and we're smiling, but at the end of the day, we're suffering. I remember a couple of years ago, we had one of the SCIU members here, and we're talking about wages, and a parent came up to me and she said, Ms. Henlon, I didn't know you guys didn't pay that much. I said, you'd be surprised. But at the end of the day, we're smiling, we're making the kids happy, and we're making them safe. And as child care workers, we need to voice our opinions. We need to voice our cares and our concerns, that the politicians hear it, that the politicians understand that we're human and we're suffering, and we need to stop suffering, because people are changing what they love to do. You tell your young people, follow your heart, go after the career that you're passionate about. But at the end of the day, child care is something that people are pulling away from, and we need child care workers. So that's one of the reasons I advocate and I take out time to get involved. And I just encourage people across the country, across the world, share your stories. Let it be known as a child care worker, and some of the points that you're struggling with, there's good and there's bad, but at the end of the day, we have our bills to pay. And that's just my story about why I'm a child care worker and some of the struggles that I'm having.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, for sharing part of your story with us. It is so very much appreciated, and it's something that more and more people need to hear. Thank you for all of the love and energy you give to each little one that walks through your door. We all appreciate it. And thank you for your points about being the voice and advocating. As someone who is passionate about working with children, you have to be able to advocate and raise that voice to make sure that the conditions that you're working in afford you a life that you dreamed of. So thank you so much for your story. We know that there are millions of others out there just like Ingrid. And so again, to put a finer point, thank you again to everyone who's joined this call today and is looking at how to advocate for the Child Care for Working Families Act. So what is the Child Care for Working Families Act? We're going to go through that right now. I'm going to turn it over to Katie Hand, the Vice President of Early Childhood Policy here at the Center for American Progress. Katie?
Thanks so much, Vanessa, and thanks to all of you who are joining us today, especially those parents and providers. We know that you have really busy schedules, so appreciate you taking the time with us today to learn about this legislation. So I want to start just by talking about the people involved in childcare today and how this bill will address some of the things that they experience now on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to start with the parents. And if there's anything I want folks to take away today from this conversation about this bill, it's that we're envisioning a system where more families are getting help paying for childcare. So today, as you all know better than I do, if you need help paying for childcare, it's going to be really hard for you to find that help that you need. There may be paperwork or different barriers to even trying to apply for a childcare subsidy. You might be turned away for a number of different reasons. You might be put on a waiting list. This is going to flip the system to say, instead of just putting a small pot of money out there and seeing how far you can stretch it, we're going to decide that if a family needs help paying for childcare, we're going to help them. And so instead of the money dictating how many families can get help, the number of families who need help are going to dictate how much we spend on childcare. And I think that's a really important distinction that this legislation makes. And it's not just about what's written on paper, it's also a value statement in our country that we know that many, many families struggle to pay for childcare, struggle to find quality, affordable childcare that works for them and their families. And so we're going to let the need dictate how much of the country we spend on childcare. The second piece is for parents, it's going to lower your childcare bills. You know, some people are told that they can actually afford childcare when we know that they can't. So this bill will nationally address how much families are paying for childcare by limiting the amount. So based on your income, you'll have a copayment in most cases, but that amount will be capped and it will be predictable. Childcare when and where parents need it. So you know, the supply of childcare today, as many of you have experienced, can be really limiting. And we know that families have really busy schedules these days and work looks different. So families are maybe working in the evenings or on weekends or a schedule that might change from week to week. And so this legislation would work to build childcare options, whether that's in areas of the country, like rural areas or smaller communities where there are fewer options, whether that means finding infant care, which can be hard to come by, whether that's care for children with special needs or summer care. The goal is to provide a lot more options to families. And then when we think about early educators, Ingrid very eloquently shared with us how hard it is for teachers to stay in this field, the low pay and the challenges just to making their basic needs a priority. So this legislation would require that all early educators are paid a living wage and that they have benefits. It would literally say that early educators have to be paid at a level that allows them to meet their basic needs like healthcare and housing and food. And then for early educators who have the same educational background and experience levels as K-12 education teachers, Ingrid mentioned that she has a bachelor's degree. Many kindergarten teachers have bachelor's degrees. So what this law would say is that someone like Ingrid with the same educational requirements as a kindergarten teacher, she has to make that same salary. And it would also provide professional development and training opportunities. There's a great, talented, 2 million strong workforce out there today, and many of those people are eager to have more professional development and training opportunities available to them. So this would make things like scholarships more available to early educators. And then last but not least, this bill addresses children's needs. So it puts in place quality standards and it creates stability for children because their families aren't receiving a child care assistance one month and then not the next month. It creates that stability that many parents want for their kids. I think, you know, a lot of people probably feel like they're playing a game of whack-a-mole when it comes to childcare. They try to improve wages, but that could increase costs. They try to improve quality, but then they find that the resources aren't there to provide, to pay for that quality. So what the Child Care for Working Families Act does is it addresses all of the people in the child care system in one foul swoop. And so it doesn't pit quality against access. It doesn't get into some of those false dichotomies that have for too long occupied our conversations. It's funding to support high quality, affordable childcare that supports children, parents, and early educators. So we're trying to transition to a well-funded childcare system that gives everyone access to the things that they need. So I wanted to just answer some of the common questions that have come up around this bill that some of you might be thinking right now. So the first question is, who's eligible? And the short answer is everyone is eligible if they earn less than 1.5 times the average income in their state. And I know that probably sounds pretty wonky, but it is designed to make sure that the cost of living in your area is taken into account. So based on the folks that I had joining us today on the call, I just looked at some examples in different states. So if you look at Washington State, for example, when you translate that 1.5 times the average income in your state, so each month, that's about, if you're making about $11,500 or less each month, you're going to qualify for child care assistance under this bill. There is a sliding scale so that parents are paying based on their ability to pay. But you know, you can see from this chart that this isn't just about one income group. This is really about low income, middle class, all working families having access to childcare, to affordable quality childcare, and paying based on their ability. Okay. The other question that I imagine a lot of parents have is how much would they pay for childcare under this bill? So what the law says is that parents don't pay more than 7% of their income on childcare, and it doesn't matter how many children you have who need childcare. 7% is the total cap. And families with smaller incomes pay less. So I took Washington State as an example. I think we had the most parents registered from Washington State. So if you looked at Washington State, and for a family of 4, if your monthly income is less than about $5,100, you don't have a child care copayment. But you can see as you move up the income level, you pay a little bit more, and it caps out right around $10,000, where you're paying about $700 a month. So you can see kind of how the sliding scale works. And again, this is just Washington State. The scale would vary based on average income. So if the cost of things like food and housing are higher in your state, the income eligibility level is going to be a little bit higher to account for that. So another question that's come up is, what's the role of parents in selecting their child care provider? So parents are definitely still the people suggesting or selecting the child care provider. You know your child best, you know your family best, you know your schedule best. So parents choose a child care provider. It might include family child care, a child care center. It could be an after-school program for people who have elementary age school children, a summer camp for the summer months when school is closed. The bill really focuses on creating more options for parents. So in addition to the type of provider, one of the goals is that there be more childcare options, especially in the evenings and on weekends. So the bill specifically addresses efforts to increase supply and increase the number of providers that are available to parents on the evenings and the weekends. So I will stop there, and we'll hear from our expert on the phone, and I'll turn it over to Vanessa and let her introduce her.
Thank you so much, Katie. And as a reminder to folks, within the chat window, it should be on the right side of your screen. Feel free to pull that down and you can send a message directly to me. And when we get to the question and answer section of our presentation, we'll happily queue those up and go through them. So now I'm really excited to turn it over to Rosa Cardenas. Again, she's from UPLAN and the Partnership for Community Action out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. She has taken the steps to lobby and advocate for childcare and early learning. As you can see, some of these adorable photos. I love the hats. So, Rosa, are you there?
Yes. Hello.
Great. Hello, you're on.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Rosa Cardenas. I am a parent, and I'm a leader and community advocate working in Albuquerque, New Mexico with the Partnership for Community Action and Abriendo Puertas. I'm also part of the UPLAN. And my story, I have 4 children. 2 of them are elementary school aged. One is 9-year-old Angelica, and my other daughter is Amaris. She is 6 years old, and my story started when Angelica was going to start preschool. I got her registered around June, July. In August, I went to check, and they said she was on a waiting list. There was no space in the school. So I kept calling. November, December, I gave up. I said, okay, she's not gonna have a chance. I'll just teach her at home. I'll review the ABC. I'll teach her the numbers. That's all she needs. And luckily, they opened a space. There was a lot of kids on the waiting list. January, they called me. She started in February. At the same time, there was an invitation from another school that they were having Abriendo Puertas. And I'm so thankful for the program. I became an educated parent. I understood the importance of how does our children's brain develop? What is the importance of being there, being involved, advocating for our kids. I like the program so much. I got certified as a facilitator for Abriendo Puertas. And 3 years later, it's pretty sad and frustrating to see that the parents, after we go through the program, after they realize the importance of early education, of quality education program, that they don't have the space, but they run into the same obstacles that I ran into. There is no space, you don't qualify, parents our children are viewed the parents are not working, the parents are making $1 more than what the limit is supposed to be, and that's very upsetting. So in advocacy, I've been, as you can see in the picture, I've gone with my daughter and other kids to the state capitol to advocate for our children. We've been trying to get the state funding, the land grant funding, for them to invest in our kids. The importance of early education, of equality, that all the kids should have the right. It's their right for education. It shouldn't be attached to parents. If they're working, if they're in school, that's not how it's supposed to be. The lessons that I've learned, it's really important for us to be in contact with our legislators and bring awareness. After 7 years, we've been going every year with many other parents and other kids, and just bring awareness to those legislators of the importance for them to see our kids and their needs. I am looking forward. I know my kids are not in preschool no more. My youngest one is in 1st grade, but I am hopeful that my grandchildren would be able to, what we have done, my daughters and myself, the aunties, that they'll be able to have the access to a good quality education. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Rosa, so much for sharing your story, and thank you so much for taking the brave step and advocating and bringing your daughter and the Pias and the kids and making it a whole family affair, and very much needed. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So after hearing about Ingrid and Rosa, we wanted to give a little bit of a preview and some ideas for how to get involved at all levels within your community. After this webinar, we'll also be sending out not only a recording, but a link for the Child Care for Working Families Act Parent and Advocate Toolkit. You should feel free to download, print, use. Some of your community organizations that you may be in contact with also have a copy, so feel free to reach out to them as well. And so how to get involved? You've heard some really amazing ways to get involved at different levels. Recognizing that folks have limited amount of time, and many of us, including myself, have a child or children, and so it seems like we're being pulled in all types of different directions. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. So getting involved within your community. Talk to your local providers and educators. I know when it's a rush at pickup, it's usually grabbing the little one, grabbing their backpack, all of their goods, and running to try to get dinner going. But it's really important to have that conversation with the providers and educators in your own system and within your own life to get a greater sense of what their experience is within your own community. That'll be a great first step and baseline for how you can move forward. Once you have that conversation, get some friends together, host a roundtable with providers, educators, and family members if possible. This is an issue that is very real to so many people across the nation. And for some families, having to make decisions about where your child goes is a day-to-day, morning-to-morning decision. However, it's not a conversation that we see a lot in a more formalized manner. And so being able to have folks to come around the table, share how they make ends meet, share how they figure out childcare is a really great place that we would recommend just starting that conversation. If you're able to have educators with you, it would be a great balance. So there you go. You now have the opportunity to really get a better sense of what a holistic viewpoint of the childcare infrastructure and within your community. The other thing is to start having a conversation on social media. I'm not saying fight with anybody or pick a fight, but what I am saying is if you start following the hashtag childcare for all, and that's childcare, the number 4 all, you can start to see stories being lifted up from across the country for folks that work in the childcare system as well as parents themselves. That'll help provide even a bigger context of what this looks like across the nation and also let people know that they're not alone. Sharing it on Twitter, on Facebook, or getting involved whenever there is activity on social media, including Twitter chats, those types of things, is a good way to start your entry into advocacy. And it also doesn't take a whole lot of time. If you're sitting there at the kitchen table, if you're sitting there on the bus or in between meetings, you can just start to retweet and start to get yourself familiar with some of the landscape and the conversations that people are having. And then we can move on to, in your local area, what does that look like? So local area and press can be a little bit tricky depending upon where you're coming from, but it's always a good practice to start reading through the paper to see what other issues are coming up that might intersect. So for instance, if there's a conversation about teachers' conditions, childcare educator and providers' conditions, those types of things, this is a great opportunity to lift up that there is a solution and that there is a vision to how to address some of these issues. And you can do that via either a op-ed or a letter to the editor. Typically, a letter to the editor is shorter, and it also is a bit easier to write and has a bit more of a personal spin. Within the Child Care for Working Families Act Parent and Advocate Toolkit, you can find some prompts as well as some easy suggestions to get your feet wet in that space. Keep in mind also many local newspapers have blogs that might even be easier to get into. So that might be a good first step into that world. And then finally, engaging with elected officials. What happens at the local level can often have the most impact in the day-to-day life of constituents. And you have the opportunity to know where your local elected officials' offices are. So the first thing that you need to do, though, is find out exactly who your local elected officials are. I think I always take it for granted that I know, but sometimes when I think about it, I have to Google that and look it up as well. Easy, Google your address, type in your address with who is my elected official, and you'll get a pop-up, typically from your state secretary of state. Do that. Start researching where they stand on the issues. Start seeing if they've made any conversations about childcare as part of their platform. See what bills they may have dropped in the state legislative house, or if in the city council area, they're working on having this conversation with providers within their own areas. It's really important before you start engaging with elected officials to get a sense of where they stand on the issue. You can continue that conversation all the way up to Congress. Start working with the state legislatures that are in your area that support the child care and recognize the need for child care infrastructure and reform. Start having those conversations, start setting up meetings in their offices, learn when their calendars are so that you know when that they're on break, and that's when they might have some more time. Find out if they're going to town halls. There's a couple of different options, particularly if you're local. So when you get to Congress, it can be a little bit harder, but the steps are essentially the same. Find out where they are in terms of research, find out when their breaks are, find out where their locations are, and start having a conversation about why you feel that they should support the Child Care for Working Families Act. So that's just a couple of things. It can be a little intimidating, but it is absolutely doable. It is a process that should have many more people advocating within it, showing up at city council meetings, showing up at state legislative hearings on issues that are important to you. Once you do it, I promise, it will be much easier as you continue to go. So that is just a couple of tips for advocating. And like I said, we'll be sending out the toolkit as well as happy to answer any questions. So now, there we go. So we have already gotten a couple of questions. First and foremost, thank you to everyone for listening. Please feel free to type your questions into the right side of your box under the chat window, and we'll get to those. So I want to start off with some of our more technical questions that we've received, and these are for Katie. So the first question is, how will benefits and higher wages in the professional development funds, everything that's been outlined in the Child Care for Working Families Act, be paid for? Is this more of the burden that is placed upon centers?
Thanks so much. That's a great question. So if you think about how childcare payments work now, childcare centers get a payment for a child who's enrolled and has a childcare subsidy that typically does not cover the cost of actually delivering that care. So, you know, a provider might get a $500 check when the actual cost of providing care on a monthly basis is more like $1,500. So what the Child Care for Working Families Act is, it does adjust that payment that the provider is receiving to reflect the actual cost of care. So the law says that states have to do estimates of the cost of child care and high quality child care at different levels of quality, and that those levels of quality have to include self-sufficiency wages for providers. So in our example, right now, a center is getting a $500 check that doesn't cover the cost of care, and they're left with that gap. What this would do is say that if the cost of quality is $1,500 a month and quality has to include fair wages for providers, then the payment that goes to the center is $1,500 a month. And if anyone has more technical questions on that point, I think Vanessa is going to put up my contact information at the end. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm very happy to get on the phone and walk through with anyone who wants to get a bit more in the weeds on this.
Great, and yes, I will be doing that. So the other question actually for Katie is, how does the policy rollout actually get implemented?
Yeah, so this is a really big change from our current system. So what the law does is it builds in some phase-in periods. So there's, for the first few years, there is a lump sum of money that would go to states, and they would start implementing some of this so that states could, prepare for the fact that they're going to be serving a lot more children. And then some of the other requirements, for example, around adjusting your payment rates and having your quality rating systems and making sure providers are part of that system, that rolls in over a time horizon to give people ample time to get ready for that shift. The bill also builds on top of the current child care law, so it's enhancing and improving a current program rather than starting from scratch.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. A couple of other questions have just come in, so keep them coming. We have some time. This one is for Rosa. Rosa, how do you sustain momentum for this fight over so many years, and why do you keep going?
Thank you. That is a great question. Big reason, New Mexico is number 49 in education. That gives me the reason not to give up, and also the momentum and just the vision, not to lose the vision. What is it that our kids need? As long as education in our state or nationwide is put at last, they should give everybody the desire to help our children.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosa. Ingrid, this one is for you. So what finally moved you to take the leap into advocacy?
It was introduced to me by Shola, who came across and just started talking about what was going on in the country. And it just started to really burn something in me, because I'm looking at my age and how many years I've put into childcare, and realizing when I reach the age of retirement, I might not be able to retire at 65 or 66 or whatever it is, due to the fact that my income is not enough to save or put aside for when I retire. And just the fact that I realized by sharing my story, there were so many others out there that were going through the same issue as myself. And that just even pushed me further. And then seeing my students coming back, like I have one young lady that was a student of mine when she was 4, and now she's a preschool teacher. And I'm saying, okay, in 20 years or 30 years when she's ready to retire, is she going to be going through the same issues as myself? So for me to speak up on behalf of everybody else in my center, it's a privilege and honor, because if we keep staying quiet, then nobody will know what's going on.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I appreciate that, and your bravery as well. So a couple of other questions we've got are more advocacy focused. Are there organizations in state that are leaders? Yes. So there are different organizations in each state which fight for child care infrastructure and professionals. And so I would definitely, easy ways to do a quick Google search for what's in your state. And the other thing, though, is that this bill came to be with a strong coalition of partners, including folks like SEIU, AFT, American Federation of Teachers, Moms Rising, as well as local organizations like UPLAN, who's presenting on here. National Women's Law Center is also a great partner in this. And so there are many different folks from different spheres who are able to advocate for this. What we are happy to do is when you take a look at the advocacy toolkit, you can get a sense of who else might be working in this space. But folks who are traditional child care advocates should have some awareness of the bill. If they don't, you can be the person to bring that to them. So please make sure to take point on that. Is there a point person in each state, and is there funding to organize and advocate for this policy? So right now, it's a little bit of the same answer. So in terms of being a point person for each state, again, it's going to be dependent upon what your state looks like and what the advocacy looks like in your state on child care issues. And within that coalition of organizations and local leaders, it's being able to have the conversation with who is that point person and have the questions about how are they planning to move some of the pieces of the bill forward. How are they planning to increase the conversation around this bill? So again, it's a little bit of the same question, so just try to get a sense of who is the who is part of the child care advocacy world in your state. And then that'll also lead to the conversation about whether or not there's funding available to organize and advocate for this policy. And some organizations have decided to fold in the Child Care for Working Families Act into their larger initiatives and pushes, which is fantastic. But others, obviously, particularly on the local level, everybody's varying in their needs and intensity and the fights that they've got going on, and we recognize that. Okay, as Katie said, if you don't have any more questions, I want to go ahead and provide information for Erin Moore, who's the national organizer for UPLAN, and Katie Ham, who you heard from, who's the Early Childhood Policy Vice President here at the Center for American Progress. You should feel free to email either of these leaders in the space, ask them technical questions, get updates, and again, please feel free to reach out. I want to say one more time, thank you so much to all of our presenters. Thank you to everyone who took time out of their busy day to have a really important conversation. We hope that you feel like you can go forward now and have a conversation with different folks about the Child Care for Working Families Act and what this innovative bill can mean for you, families, and your community. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.